Are you a Christian? Because if you are, this message then is made for you, especially for my fellow men, fathers, and husbands. And I'm speaking from the gap. What gap, you may ask? And that's a fair question. The gap that I'm speaking from is the great divide, the no man's land, that spans between the church, as we know it today, and the rest of the world. For as a religious people, we have built up tall walls and built gardens inside in which we go and postulate ourselves and share platitudes and make proclamations, and then forget much of what we have discussed, even as we leave the pews in which we sit, and judge the person next to us and point the finger and cast stones. And by the time we've gotten to the car, much of that which we had reflected upon a few moments prior is gone. Now, perhaps this is not you. Perhaps you're walking genuinely in faith. Perhaps each day you're taking intentional and decisive action to aim upward, bear up under your cross, and aim for perfection in your pursuit of Christ. So that maybe, just maybe, your life will amount to something of purpose-driven impact that empowers, through love and your strength, the lives of those whom you have the responsibility to steward your interactions with well. And if that's you, then you too are in the gap. But this gap is a critical place, because from it, I have been able to observe and walk both in and of the world and in and of the church as we currently see it. For years, I have deeply studied the library of texts that makes up the biblical corpus. For years, I've studied philosophy and psychology and other major world religions, even archaic ones such as North paganism. I have practiced the art of war. I have built strength. I have loved deeply and greatly. And I found some of my deepest relationships, my best friends, my comrades in arms, my brothers and sisters, to be those who have been so burned and hurt by the church that they sneer at the idea of religious people. And I too have sneered and continue to burn with rage at the division, the deceit, the lies that religion creates. And yet I stand here as a man of faith, imperfectly pursuing with a relentless zeal and indomitable spirit that upward aim to make something better of myself, so that maybe, just maybe, if I can burn out enough of the dead wood within myself, if I can remove enough of the log that blinds my own eyes, that I might be able to steward well and influence through love, positive interactions with those around me, regardless of their worldview, of their beliefs, of the manner in which they walk through life. Calling forward men and women in unity to progress freedom, create value, and treat each other well, and in so doing, doing good. To steward the resources that we have to their maximal potential. To not allow a single moment of our fleeting lives to go by wasted. And yet I've erred so often. I've fallen into the bottle more times than I care to admit. I've sinned in ways that only God and I know. And I will carry the marks of some of the decisions that I've made that have scarred my very soul to the grave. But it is even those marks. It is the wrestling with God and the church and the world and the hatred of myself and the hope that there's something more that I've been built and that I found freedom to pursue a genuine and authentic attempt at a life well lived. And I practiced the art of a maximized life to the best of my ability, imperfectly, but striving violently and valiantly forward to the best of my ability. And this seems to me to be important because as I've lived in the gap, I've done much that others won't. Not to self congratulate or raise up my own ego, but because it seemed the only way. I watched through the government mandates and closures of COVID how the world turned on itself as it went into isolation. And being one who's raised my right hand and sworn an oath to defend our Constitution and to progress and defend freedom with my dying breath, I've grown enraged. And being one who was raised in a church and watched as my family destroyed itself from within and then was abandoned by the majority of that church, my heart broke. And as I grew, I struggled deeply. And in many ways, that struggle continues today. But one thing is clear: we have work to do. We cannot abdicate the responsibility born of our faith any longer. And regardless of one's faith, we have a responsibility to live well, to have courage in choosing our response to the situations that we face, to accept that which we can't control with as much serenity and peace as we can possibly muster. And when we do not know whether something is in our control or not, to think deeply and hope and pray for the wisdom to discern how it is that we may best respond. It is in these ways that we have such a rich opportunity. We have an opportunity to be salve, a healing ointment for the brokenhearted. We have the opportunity to heal our own hearts and to learn to love more deeply, to pursue the hearts of our wives and children, to pursue the hearts of our fellow brothers and sisters. And I do not just mean those of faith. I mean of fellow humankind. There's absolutely darkness and evil in the world. The enemy is here to steal, kill, and destroy. But before any of us is quick to point the finger at who the supposed enemy is, we must realize that the line of good and evil runs through the heart of every man, every woman, every child. So if you're a man of faith, sit down and let us begin a conversation so that when we stand up, we can do so with discipline and intentionality, so that we can relentlessly move forward with an upward aim, creating along the way better versions of ourselves that create a ripple effect through our homes, community, and the world. And let us scream with every ounce of passion we have for freedom, for love, and to do good unto our fellow man. And when we come across some wicked act that preys on the innocent and seeks to rob, kill, and destroy, let us not commit the great sin of omission or commission. For every word we speak and every silence we choose has a great price. We must be men of action. Theorizing and philosophy is worthless without action. So therefore, why would we go into a walled room with hundreds of people we do not know and emotionally and mentally masturbate ourselves into a frenzy and then leave forgetting all that we just did and ignoring it to go back and live lukewarm, unintentional, wasteful lives, self centered on our own woes, and incapable of greater love, compassion, service, or stewardship. What a shame. I've had the great honor and pleasure of walking with men and women of every creed, belief system, orientation, life view, and world perspective, or at least many of them, not every. And I've been challenged by the differences. But my focus has been on that which will unify because I'm so tired of the division. I'm so tired of the war that rages within my own heart where half of me wants to destroy the other half. That I'm seeking peace. A peace that I only find when I'm acting to the best of my ability in unity with the call of Christ to love my neighbor as myself, which means I must learn to love myself, which is a hard pill to swallow after years of trying to destroy myself and thinking that the way to peace and freedom was to destroy the weaker versions of myself, not realizing that within me was a deep hurt that did not need destroyed, but subjugated to the authority of something more powerful, to discipline. Discipline intentionally aimed upward. Imagine with me for a moment that you're on your deathbed. And as you sit there, you see a figure approaching. And as that figure gets closer, you realize with horror that that figure is you, but not the you that's dying. It's the you that you could have been had you woken up and had you intentionally forged forward with every fiber of your being. It's the you that made the hard choices now to create the you in the future that you feel called to create, but numb and hide behind the distractions of the day, of the distractions of pleasure, the distractions and excuses of need, and therefore allowed to slip away back into the mist and gray of unintentionality as another day disappears. And when this high version of yourself gets to your side and looks down at you, it simply states, "You withheld me. Now die." Because with you and with me, so too the positive light, impact, power, and dreams that could have been brought forth to the world to shine brightly and inspire hope and create strength and unity die with you. And now this mantle of responsibility will pass to another. Go. What an interesting thought, especially for such an ignorant people to think that we are immortal. I would challenge you to sit and look in the mirror, long and hard. And as you look yourself and find the things that need to change, no matter how large or how small, take courage and the gift of a single intentional action to close that gap. And as you look in the mirror, look through yourself, behind you, and see death waiting to seize your body at an hour and moment that you do not know. A moment that could be today, as early as you're sitting here watching this, or perhaps driving home, perhaps tonight in your sleep, perhaps through the next intersection. Or maybe, if you're fortunate, decades from now, as you lie peacefully in your bed, surrounded by those whom love you and you love, and have poured yourself out in stewardship and service of, giving all that you are to close the gap between who you are and who you could be, bearing up under the weight of your cross, to follow our God mightily, intentionally, and with every breath, to the best of your ability. And when you have fallen, which we will, time and time again, you rise again, grounding yourself in the gratitude of grace freely given, and offering yourself as a bondservant to Christ, as we are called to give everything so that we may rise. As a people of faith, we call ourselves Christians, those who are meant to emulate Christ. But what's more, we are waymakers. For the very example given to us by Christ was that there is no obstacle that cannot be made the way. For when he saved us with his sacrifice and conquered death, he conquered the one thing that we are incapable of conquering, and in so doing gave us life. A life that can transcend the views and perspectives of the world that seek to believe in scarcity instead of abundance, and therefore take instead of give. Then how much more are we supposed to emulate this great example of forging a way through the indomitable thought of death, than in our own lives to face every challenge with temperance, courage, and relentless desire to conquer? I'm standing from the gap because I do not belong to the church as we know it today, nor do I belong to the world. Though I've walked in both for large portions of my life and been torn in two between them, I now stand before you, imperfect, but as a united individual. A man who sees a clear path forward that is arduous, challenging, and will likely cost me everything. And I'm grateful for this path. Because as I've struggled in this gap, I've done things that others won't, so that I can gain the capability to do things that others can't. Not for some feigned superiority, but so that with the heart of a teacher, from the center of the breach, I can hold the ground and reach my arm back and call forward others to join me. And as I stand here, I'm raising 4 young men. And I refuse to allow a single battle that is my responsibility to engage in to pass to their shoulders. And I will erect a platform from which they can launch into the world. And they will go beyond me in ways that I cannot even fathom to continue this work in their own lives and the unique and specific ways that the Lord calls them to be agents of love, of strength, of protection, of agency, of action. What's more, as much as this may feel an admonishment, and in many ways it is, for we have acted shamefully in our negligence and our abdication of responsibility, it is truly an invitation. It is a cry of outrage that screams hope. It is an opportunity to wake up, not just because of the emotional relief of that time in which you realized you were saved, but to live for that very gift. I've heard often, would you die for something? There's a lot of things I'll die for. I'll die for my wife and sons. In a moment of kinetic events, I'll die for my friends, if that's what's required in the fight. I'll die for freedom. I'll die for these beliefs that I share with you now. But what I've been called to do, and until the day that my heart stops beating, I will continue to do, is much more difficult. I will live for these things. I will live for the perfect gift of grace that has set me free. I will live for my faith that the greatest resource known to humankind is the potential that lies within each of our chests. I will live for the pursuit to unleash that potential, to love mightily, to invite people in with open arms, to expose myself vulnerably so that they may experience love. And if they burn me, instead of growing reproachful, learn and move on to the next soul that may desire that love and that invitation. This is what we're called to do. And just as much, we must stand against evil. But we must be very careful in defining what that evil is. It is not your neighbor, unless your neighbor preys on the innocent and the youth and those weaker than themselves. There are wicked human beings and forces that desire to exploit children and women and those weaker for personal gain, who desire to enslave others in our very country, much less the world. And perhaps there's the opportunity for some of them to be transformed. But in the kinetic moment of need, it is not weakness that stops bad men from doing evil. It is strong men, capable of incredible violence, that stops evil men. It is strong men who refuse to allow their souls to petrify in the seats of the arena, sneering at those who fight within it, but rather leap into the blood-churned mud of that arena and fight forward valiantly with every fiber of their being, who strive mightily to be the great doers of deeds, who believe in the dream that we are created equal, who believe that we are all capable of being saved by grace freely given, but that we ourselves are not saviors. We ourselves are simply men. Men whose primary task is to master oneself and beat the man in the mirror, to incorporate the broken parts, to heal, to love oneself. Why? So that we may know how to love our wives, our children, our friends, so that we may be able to create immense value, build strong communities, be progressors of freedom, and steward all that comes before us well. We must increase our strength. We must increase our compassion. We must not allow evil to rise by our silence and weakness. We must not allow good to be withheld by the same. And the only way forward is through ourselves and into the world. And if we do this, maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to close the gap, tear down the walls, and become one with our fellow man and allow a single message of hope to shine forth and usher in a new era. And the greater that hope shines, the brighter that light, the greater the need for strength, the greater the need for compassion, and the greater the need for an orientation towards decisive action. So let us no longer be weak, lukewarm, passive men. Let us choose to be waymakers. Those who believe that the obstacle is the way, and therefore we must rise. Those who believe that the lives whom we have the responsibility of stewarding well is worth everything to live for. And those who believe that through the progression of freedom and solving the problems that we are capable of solving and doing good in whatever way, no matter how small, we can make this world a brighter place. Let us be those who, when the call comes, we stand and say, "Here I am, send me," and then move forth unflinchingly into that great fray. Let us be part of the healing. Let us put to death the lies. And this is the invitation of a man of faith who stands within the gap and has and will continue to wrestle with God. I humbly submit to you the opportunity to join me and forge forward.